one thing which most founders will definitely give an arm and leg for is high agency folks who just run once given a mandate. Being obsessed about a problem and making sure that you take it to its logical conclusion is important before you start diversifying into others, right? In India or world over, you're never going to be successful alone. If you're going to be successful, people will necessarily take a crack at it. Well, there was this restaurant partner that we, had in Dehradun who survived the pandemic because Swiggy was still relevant.
Hi, my name is Amrit. We've heard that IT Madras is the best place to build. So we've come down to the Sudhan Shankar Innovation Hub. We want to meet some people. These are builders. We want to talk to them about their work and also ask them what makes IT Madras the best place to build. Hi, welcome to the Best Place to Build podcast. Today we're sitting with Phani Kishan, co-founder at Swiggy. It's a very exciting day for me because it's going to be a great conversation. Welcome, Phani.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me here, Madras.
Phani, let's start with so we all know that you're the co-founder of Swiggy and he's been, I'm guessing, a very exciting last 10 years. But let's start from the beginning. You were a student at IT Madras in the computer science department.
Yes, I did.
Why don't we start there? Tell us about how you got here. What is your JEE experience like?
Yeah, I keep joking about this, but there was a time in my life when I gave like an entrance exam to get into a coaching institute, which is preparing me for an entrance exam to get into a coaching institute, which is preparing me for an entrance exam to get into IIT.
Okay.
Right. So I come from like a hardcore lineage of, people who are trying to crack IIT from a very young age.
Okay.
That was kind of actually, if this is surprising, I would say that you've not been to Hyderabad. Like it's pretty common for people to do something like this, right? But I would say my experience getting into IIT Madras was pretty straightforward, actually, to be honest. I was quite lucky to get the rank that I did. Actually, mine was the second batch where we switched from the subjective, oriented exams that you used to have to the multiple choice or objective.
The mains and the advanced. Was it
No.
paper one, paper two?
No, we only had one exam
Okay.
still, but basically we switched from these long format questions where you would actually write down proofs,
Right.
etc., to a format which is more MCQ oriented, right? Multiple choice questions and match the following.
Yeah.
Objective is what we used to call it, right? So that is the switch that was made as a second batch.
Now that's become the mains, and then you qualify that and you give another.
Yeah, I think now they, at least from what I understand, they have like a common exam for JEE, which is for many institutes even outside IIT Madras, IITs, and then you have the advanced, which kind of determines whether you get into IITs or not, right? Is that right?
That is correct. And now the exams are conducted by NTA, National Testing Academy, and the entrance is actually held centrally by an organization called JOSA.
Correct. Understood. Yeah. So we didn't have all of this. It was pretty straightforward. We did counseling. I had a bunch of friends who also studied along with me from my school. Actually, there are like 7 people from my school who joined IITs, my same batch, right? So we all kind of actually ended up in IIT Madras because it was fun to like just continue the vibes, if I could say that. Yeah, I was in CS. Unfortunately, I was just telling you right before, I wrote my last line of code this weekend, and the last one before that was 15 years ago. But been out of the computer science world from a coding perspective, I would say. But yeah, I graduated from IIT Madras, joined IMCAL at that point of time.
Wait, once I want to just reflect on this. Students in class 12, when they join after studying for JEE and when they start their engineering first year, second year, it's quite a bit of shock. Because engineering is quite different from what you studied in 11th and 12th. And I think in computer science, the shock is quite heavy.
Yeah, actually, I mean, given the first year, I assume the case it is the first semester and second semester, like common courses that you end up doing. Like you still do math, you still do physics, you still do chemistry. Of course, you have the CS 110, if it's still called that, I'm not sure. The first coding introduction that everyone does, right? EC 101, 110, whatever, right? So I wouldn't actually say that there's a dramatic shift from how things go because you're still doing math, right? You're still doing physics, you're still doing chemistry. The switch comes a little bit more gradually. Like when you start doing, 2-1 is when you go a little bit more deeper. But by then, I think you're probably already settled in
Yeah.
well enough into campus life and how the classes are. I was also fortunate because I had a brother. My brother was like 2 years senior to me in IIT Madras.
Okay.
Um, so he was in mechanical. I'd actually visited the IIT Madras campus when I was in my class 11 when I was preparing. That kind of motivated me a little bit because I really like the campus. It's massive. It's amazing. It's actually amazing to be back.
Yeah.
I can't, wait for people to come visit it.
Yeah.
My fiance is here. I would love for her to show around the campus because it's just so
It's
great.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really good. So I actually quite got motivated um, to crack JE even more when I visited the campus, saw how the vibes were here. And yeah, I mean, I did have some amount of guidance given my brother was
Nice.
here before me.
Also, but in that, in computer science especially, it's also very competitive because like
Uh,
everybody's a top ranker, right? And then maybe you were top of your batch. I don't know in coaching, and then here you are, and everybody's must have been top of their batch, and it's
Yeah, I think that's going to be true actually of most branches. Like most people who come to, an IIT Madras or any of the IITs would probably have been
yeah,
class
fair enough.
toppers in
Sure.
some shape or form. And
Fair enough. Fair enough.
right. So I don't think it's going to change dramatically um, from branch A to branch B. But it's true. I mean, there is obviously this whole sense of coming in. You always got straight A's and you always like number one, and then suddenly you realize that hey, class average is not that bad
Yeah.
after a point in time.
Yeah, I'm
So,
okay with a
yeah,
7.
yeah, at least class average I think in CS was 8, so it's good. Uh, Actually, for example, I told you right, like, and I think what you guys are doing really right now is really great because back when I was coming into campus, it was not super clear on, hey, why should I pick computer science or why should I pick electrical or why should I pick
Yeah.
mechanical or any of these branches, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those systems while you do have these branch changes that you can shift from one branch
It's
to
not there anymore.
oh, you can't? You can't?
No, because what's happened over time is that the system has become more flexible.
Right.
So every branch, every course, or every program has a large number of free electives.
Right.
So 40% of your courses you can choose.
Oh,
So
okay.
you don't need the branch change to take
Got it.
other
Got it.
courses.
Understood. Yeah. In my case, you had a branch, and then to be honest, it's like a little very restrictive because you're making one decision when you are like 18 years old.
Yeah.
And then that's just basically stuck with you for a good amount of your life, right? I think it's changed a little bit right now. People are comfortable moving out, branching out from their space, which they studied in,
But
etc.
still, at the time, the weight of that decision is
Yeah,
heavy.
it is, right? And actually, I'm quite thankful to my brother because, there is this whole, at that time, the vibe was like, there are these core branches. You have electrical, mechanical, civil, and chemical, which are core, and everything is like an offshoot of sorts.
Mm.
I don't know what the vibe right now is. But he was very clear. He said, boss, you need to, if you get a good enough rank, you should probably join CS,
Mm.
which I would say has been a great decision. In hindsight, as I said, I don't code and stuff, but as the way the world evolved over the last
Yeah.
10, 15 years, I think it was a wise decision in hindsight.
Now, after IIT, you went to IIM.
Yeah, I did.
And so, I want to reflect on this a little bit. You were at CS and you moved from a core branch to a management science kind
Yeah.
of field.
Yeah. So to be very honest, the decision was led a fair bit by my wanting to not work. Like, I said, I'm too young to be working right now. I want to maybe
Delay the
delay joining any company, right? I don't think my grades were good enough to like pursue MS in the US or anywhere else, right? Even in India, or actually to be very fair to myself and everyone, but I was not like super drawn to the concept. I actually really liked something like data structure algorithms, things like that, which is a little bit more theoretical in nature, like cracking the problem as opposed to maybe coding, which I always saw as like implementing the solution, and I used to get these segmentation fault errors when I used to try to code, which kind of depressed me a fair bit. So I said, okay, I can't code.
Okay.
That's not really my forte by any stretch. So that's when I started looking at what else could I do, and the other option which I had was basically take CAD and join B school.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of how I ended up in B school. I wouldn't say it was like a thought through decision, and I planned for it, and everything was, like ducks were lined up, and I started shooting them. No, it wasn't at all.
Fair enough. And after IIM Cal, at some point, you moved to Swiggy, right? So
Yeah.
can you tell me the journey here? And also, it's interesting to me because this is the period, I think 2011, 12, there were a bunch of food startups. I used to run a food startup.
Yeah.
It was a difficult operation,
Yeah.
heavy business.
Yeah.
UPI was not there. Smartphones were not there, and Google Maps was not there. So it was not an easy business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to take that decision to sort of after CS, Cal to move into a food tech kind of startup.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see the story. To be honest, like after IMCAL, I went to a consulting firm. I went to BCG, right? And again, I didn't apply a lot of my brain. It is still a fairly reputed firm and stuff like that, right? So if you look at it, it's like the classic sheep. Go to IIT, then go to maybe B school, join a consulting firm, that sort of stuff. Uh, it was around a couple of years into my consulting stint, even a little bit earlier, where I started to think about what is it that I exactly want to do in life, right? And um, as sacrilegious as it may sound to Professor Ravindran, who was my BTP prof, I was I was drawn to the whole tech world a fair bit, right? And if you look back at that point of time, the tech of the world was still Facebook and Google and Microsoft and et cetera, right? Indian tech was just coming. I think 2014, 2015 is kind of, let's say, the seminal year in Indian tech when, Flipkart raised $1 billion.
Yeah.
Snapdeal raised a ton of money. Myntra got acquired. There was Uber, Ola. I was working in BCG. You get these quote unquote perks of commute. Like you get a 6 or hours or whatever, right? You can book a cab whenever you want. And then they basically said, listen, there are better options, Uber and Ola, just book them yourselves, claim reimbursement. So the world was changing a fair bit, right? By then, smartphones, for example, had become fairly ubiquitous, is what I would say, right? And not the BlackBerry keypad, smartphones, but the actual, smartphones as we know them today, right? So I kind of actually felt that there is a big change, and sitting in BCG, working, let's say, in a bank or any of the places that you do in an AC room in Bombay is probably not going to give you a real perspective of what's happening on the ground, right? Because I mean, now there are enough publications that cover tech startups and what's happening, and it's big, it's great for the um, industry as well. But back then you probably had one or two, and even they were not covering them, right? Your story was probably one of the first.
Just started, I think. 2010, 11 they started.
Yeah, so you couldn't even get information, and the only way I thought you'd get a sneak peek was to be part of it, and that's when I started searching for potential companies to join, explore, etc. Right? Got connected to Harsha, who's the CEO founder of Swiggy. He and I didn't overlap in IMCAL. He was 2 years my senior, so we didn't really overlap, but we had a lot of common friends.
Okay.
And incidentally, he had a very good friend who was my flatmate when I was in Bombay, right? And very good friend of mine even now. And he reached out to him. I reached out to the same guy, basically saying, hey, if you know any opportunities. He had just moved to Amazon in Bangalore, okay? So, and I said, hey, you guys seem to be looking to talk to other people. Why don't you connect? And I don't think it was like a thought through decision, basically saying, hey, food tech is going to be like amazing. It's the new future. I don't know if Harsha thought about it in that way as well. Yeah, I mean, my only big drive was, hey, I like the conversation. I know Harsha, he had a pretty strong reputation even before I joined. And being in Bangalore, building a startup, I thought would expose you to a lot more opportunities, even if this doesn't work out. And that was the leap of faith, right? If you're looking for why food delivery, and I was not even there when the decision for food delivery was taken.
Okay.
It preceded me, right? By the time I decided to join Swiggy, we just were raising a first round of investment after hitting $50 a day or $100 a day.
I've read this interview where you say that we raised this first round, or I don't know if it's first round or second round, and then you had to suddenly hire 25,000 delivery.
No, actually, we didn't have to hire 25,000 delivery partners. I was saying, um, in my first conversation with Harsha, and then there's Nandy's other founder, right? So we just, outside a chai sutta shop, just having a conversation, right? And me and Harsha were talking about what does food delivery going to look like, what is the future, etc. So, I don't think any of us knew what exactly we were talking about. We're just always
Hypothetical.
good to have that slightly dreamier conversations, right? And then what I remember really well is basically Nandan coming to me and basically saying, hey, if you have to hire 25,000 delivery partners,
Mm.
what would you do?
Mm.
And we literally were doing, I think, 60 orders a day or something like that, right? Like 4 of us could probably do those orders. And I'm like, why are we trying to hire 25,000 delivery partners? So it kind of actually was setting maybe the foundation for dreaming big,
Right.
is what I would say. Like, yeah, you will some things into existence in some shape or form, right? So the story behind that is not that we're planning to hire 25,000, but how if we had to hire, how would we do it?
Right.
Uh,
It's interesting. You're saying that it started as a small conversation, but even at the very beginning, you were thinking, what if this was really big? Right.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, to be honest, like, so I joined Swiggy, right, and then I started playing a bunch of like handyman roles, if I can call them that, right, and one of them was basically to because I knew how to work Excel and make PPTs because I came from a consulting background. I was also starting to manage some part of our investor relations. We had a bank, but I was managing some part of the investor relations. And in that, you make these Excel models of 5 years out, how the business economics is going to look like, 10 years out,
Right.
what it's going to look like. And to be honest, we're quite surprised at the scale we've achieved because even our Excel models didn't really put the size and scale.
It's interesting because most of the time when you look at these Excel model, you think that the Excel model is
Yeah,
exaggerated.
that is true.
But
That is
you're
true.
saying that it's the other way around.
Yeah, but I think the world has changed.
Yeah.
Now people are dreaming big even when they start out, a lot more than then, because 2015 you had basically, I mean, I would give a lot of credit to the folks at Flipkart. When I met Benny, I told him the same thing as well, right? Like, it's they kind of set the stage for people to dream enough to start
Sure.
companies. I
You've
would,
given us the permission to think big,
yeah, like,
or you've
and
shown us that it's possible.
yeah, shown as it's possible, right? It's like, it's one of my favorite things which I keep talking to the team about a fair bit is the 4-minute mile. Till the time Roger Bannister did it, basically people said you can't do it.
Yeah.
You'll probably die if you try to do it, etc., etc. And then he did it, and then a few
When
hundred
everyone
people,
did it.
and a few
Yeah.
hundred people
Yeah.
did it, right? Like, it kind of is like the glass ceiling that once it shatters, once it breaks, it just makes it possible for other people to imagine. It's like what DeepSeek probably just did,
Yeah.
right, with their R1 launch or whatever,
Yeah.
where they said, oh, you know what, the training costs can actually be
Yeah.
much lower than what,
And also that you don't have to be in the valley to do this.
and you don't need H100 chips.
Yeah.
And you don't need to code at the CUDA level. And
Sure.
you can, suddenly it just kind of
Sure.
opens up your possibility in a big way. And I think I would definitely give, let's say, credit to a Flipkart.
So you were saying in that period, in the 2013, 14, 15 period, Flipkart's big movement, I mean, of course, they did it really well, but also that they sort of allowed all of us
Yeah.
to think that we can also do this.
Not just that, I think it allowed basically, venture capital firms. Like,
Mm.
how many in 2013, tell me one company we should have thought that an Indian company could have raised $1 billion. Now I think multiple companies have done that. PhonePe has done it, we've done it, etc., right? It was unimaginable,
Yeah.
to basically do that, right? So they actually opened, I think, talent. These people felt that, oh, I could actually join this companies like this. It opened up founders. I think it opened up, um, venture capital firms to say we can take bets because the outcomes can be large. And then that set the stone. I think Freshworks probably did that for SaaS startups in India.
Fair enough. I want to just reflect on this a bit. You joined Swiggy. You are you are a co-founder, but you are not there on day one. And
Yeah.
it's I want to understand this a little bit now. Also, from a point of view of what does co-foundership mean?
Yeah.
Also, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, we have this reflection. Elon Musk is the founder of Tesla, but he was not there on day one.
Right.
And in Facebook, there was a founder on day one, but he's not. Nobody remembers his name now.
Yeah.
So, what does it mean? What does co-foundership mean, and how does this work?
Yeah, see, I'm not usually, or I don't generally profess to pigeonhole things into one thing or the other, but I can give you my perspective for what it's worth, right? I think there is definitely a question of impact, which is always going to be there, right? And if you think about Intel, right? Of course, there's Moore and Noyce, but most people remember Grove.
Yeah,
right.
Andy Grove. Yeah.
Andy Grove is number
He was not.
Yeah, he was the third employee
Yeah.
of Intel, right? Like, I would say that probably history will look back at Microsoft, and if you think 100 years down the line, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there's Bill Gates, but
you will not remember the CEO that was between Bill Gates and Satya Nadella.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
people do remember it.
He now remembers.
Yeah,
it,
but 100 years from
from
now, right?
Yeah,
So
get it.
I actually think that, Coke exists for 150 years.
Yeah.
Right? McKinsey has existed. Like, there are people, and I'm not trying to say this about myself, but I think there are people who have a non-trivial impact, right? I think that's probably going to be one important thing because, Intel is known for,
Sure.
Grove, and Satya is probably going to go down as maybe the most seminal CEO of our times, for sure, right? So I think there's definitely an element of impact, but also I think there's an element of values. A lot of people are going to create impact. I think there are definitely, I can think of many people who have created more impact than I have in Swiggy, right? But there's also an element of, um, I would say, values, like how you live, breathe, the principal agent problem that, let's say, even Naval, for example, talks about, right? I think that's another important dimension, which is going to be there. Me personally, I I have been. It's not that alien because I've been with Swiggy since we were doing $100 a day or something when I joined, right? So it's not that alien. But even as I look back, I keep talking to new age founders, newer founders rather, who are trying to make this decision and stuff. Does it feel right? Like, does it feel in your phone bones? Does it feel like this person is actually someone you would want to give the stewardship? Because it's not just impact; it's also the values. They are going to represent you in every possible room, right? In my conversation with Harsha, right, it just made it a little bit more boundaryless, right? To have a title like a founder, right? I could possibly walk into any conversation and not have to worry about trampling on other people's feet, and the other people don't worry because it's coming from, otherwise, the best of people also still get a little bit more
Correct.
territorial, worry a little bit about perception. Why is he coming into me? It just made things easier, and that's why I made the decision.
Fair enough. I think there's like a perceived gap between founders, founding team. It sometimes is very blurry.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's see, if you've been from the start, you're
You
as
can-
much
Yeah,
a
exactly.
founder, and if you made a non-trivial impact, right?
Yeah.
Some people end up getting a title, some people don't. But one thing which most founders will definitely give an arm and leg for is high agency folks, who just run once given a mandate. That's probably what is that I would look for,
Sure.
and I'm deeply grateful for anyone who's like that.
Sure. I think fair answer. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Um, One of the things that's really remarkable about Swiggy, also because I'm based in Bangalore, so you do meet a lot of people who have worked in Swiggy or who have been there from the beginning, and you end up talking about how Swiggy has been inside. And so, one of the things I've always admired about Swiggy is that Swiggy has followed a lot of frameworks and models right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Also, a lot has changed, right, from 2014 to now. Of course, smartphones were just coming in, but they blew up, and the 5G revolution happened.
Yeah.
UPI came in, and maps came in, and then the pandemic came in.
Yeah.
So, what kind of models do you use that allows you to sort of go through all this change that's happening with your customers?
Yeah, I think I'll answer this with a framework as well, right? I think it's something which it's not mine. It's not mine. It's basically Jeff Bezos who said it, right? And this is a question that he's actually gone on record basically saying people keep asking all the time, saying, "Hey, what is going to change? What is the next year going to be looking like? What is 5 years going to look like? What are you worried about, etc." Right? And his pushback, of course, is basically what doesn't change,
Yeah.
right? What doesn't change.
I think he says people will always want their stuff faster and cheaper.
Yeah, a wider selection, a lower prices, and a faster delivery, right? More convenience. That won't change, right? And uh, I think that's a good question to ask ourselves, right? What is going to be true 5 years later? The world is going to change dramatically. Like, I don't know how many people expected, let's say, um,
10-minute
whole
delivery.
10-minute delivery transformer architecture to come along.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah.
Like, there's
So, yeah, nobody expected LLMs to take over.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, and to be honest, it's just sitting in plain sight, right? Like Google released it, what, 2018, 2019,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? So I just think, your only thing is going to be to keep looking at, from our perspective, has always been obsessing very, very deeply about what customers want. And when we drew up our values for Swiggy, uh, our first value was basically about being obsessed about the customer. The customer always comes first. And we went to very good lens because there's a big debate at that point of time saying, hey, for a sales manager, the customer is actually a restaurant. For an operations manager, the customer could be a delivery partner. For a marketing guy, the customer could be someone else, etc., etc.
Because you're a three-faced
Yeah,
firm.
and we were super clear that when we say customer, we meant the actual end consumer,
Okay.
right? We live to serve our consumers, and the only reason why we will succeed or fail is if we do right by them. That's probably, if I have to distill all our frameworks and anything into one thing, it is just that, right? Just absolutely obsessed about the consumer.
You mentioned that customer obsession is like a value.
Yeah.
And that helps you sort of stay connected with everything. What are the other values you have? And also, I'm very curious because for a startup, the moment you sort of freeze your values is a big moment, right? So when did that happen? What are your values and how has it changed over time?
So I see, when I joined from consulting, right? I think there were many things for me to unlearn, right? And for example, one of the big things to unlearn was, um, the burden of proof is incredibly high in consulting, right? You're going in advising a multi-billion-dollar startup or a company, and then you need to be sure about what you're advising, right? And in startup, it's completely opposite. Um, the other thing for me is bring in some frameworks or some ideas that I got from consulting background after having worked with some companies into a startup. And one of them was culture was an important thing, right? So our first set of values were drafted probably in 2015 or 2016.
Okay, that's quite early, right?
Yeah. Like, I think you should obsess a lot more about surviving before values.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were young kids, we didn't know what to do, and I wouldn't do it a different way,
Yeah.
to be honest, even today. But we did actually come up with, 3 or 4 values, even before we were fully in the clear of having a sustainable business, if I can call that, right? So we were early. We've actually had like 2 versions of it. Now we have like 11 values. We have a lot of values. At
This
this
can
point.
be as 12, by the way.
Yeah. So we don't. It's okay. We didn't necessarily say that everything needs to be something that people can rat off at the top of their mind, right? We have simple frameworks. We basically have what we call as who we are. Um, how we act and how we think. Those are the 3 broad buckets that we do. So who we are is probably the most important for us, right? The who we are has been a lot more about humility, honesty, curiosity to learn. Right? Those are things that we actually hold very dear. Anyone coming into the company needs to necessarily espouse aspects of being humble, being honest, having high levels of integrity, being very curious, because that's probably what is going to grow you. Then we have these how we act, which is thinking consumer first, win-win. That's something we added, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go
Sure,
into
sure.
values,
Let's not
but
make it a value conversation. But what I understand from what you're saying is that the core that you started this value exercise pretty early, so maybe inspired from your earlier uh, stints. And once it was in, customer obsession was on the top.
yeah, it was super clear for us that on day 0 that's what we wanted to be very, very. See, and I'm sure everyone's seen the Netflix culture deck.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the
If
seminal.
they haven't, now they will.
Yeah, they should. If you've not seen it, you should be seeing the Netflix culture deck, because it talks about things in many ways. And one of the things they start off the whole deck with, I'm sure you remember, is basically showing a slide of integrity and etc. etc. And then they switch to the next slide and it's Enron, right? Like,
These are the values of Enron.
yeah. So it's not what you say. I think what you
One of the funniest things that's happened on the internet is that the Enron, the words Enron, now has been bought over by a comedy troupe. So they run the Enron website and the Enron channel, and it's hilarious.
really? I checked it out.
But just poof. It's amazing. So anyway, but I understand what you're saying, and at a high level, that's fine. But say you have to build a product and you have to take decisions on a daily level. And of course, being in Bangalore, maybe at least the urban cities have seen it more. Swiggy has brought in a lot of new products, has merged them, has killed them. So there must be like ways to think about how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that?
Yeah. See, internally we try to follow. It's not always the case, but we try to follow a stage gate procedure, right? The first and foremost thing that when you're trying to do anything is, do customers love your product? Without that, you anyway, everything else fails, right? So that's the first stage. Whenever we try to something new, the first thing we try to do is assess if consumers are going to love the product, right? The second thing we do is then say, is this a large enough market? At the size and scale at which we operate, the opportunities need to be meaningfully large for us to go after, right?
Sure.
And that's what we check for the next, right? The third thing is basically saying that, hey, can we establish proof points of profitability? And then the fourth part is scale, right? Like, then we start scaling the business. So that's kind of how we've stage gated ourselves internally saying prove consumer love, show that can become large, prove that it's profitable, and then you get the money to scale, right? And there have been enough businesses which the nature of innovation we are sitting in CFI is you are more likely to fail than succeed.
Yeah.
As someone said, if you're not failing enough, you're not trying hard enough. Like you're not pushing yourself enough in that sense. So we keep trying, we keep tinkering with a bunch of stuff. If you have 1 in 5 hit rate, I think we'll take it. Like Instamart, for example, came from one of these explorations that we end up doing, right? And we have 3 other explorations we did which didn't necessarily pan out the way we thought they would.
Of course, you were heading super daily, so that's something that I guess
Yeah,
didn't cross the last stage.
yeah. I think we had amazing customer love. It was going to be a very large market. At one point, we were delivering to 200,000 households every day without investing a lot into marketing, right? Because our thesis at that point of time was you get a foot into the door with milk. So we used to deliver milk on a subscription basis every day to people's houses, and then along with your milk, you can also order bread, eggs, etc., right? And uh, you know, I would say we had that customer love. We had high retention. People love us. We had pretty good scale, but we could never just get the economics to work.
Okay.
Right. At that point of time, I think it was also an execution thing. Sometimes you're ahead of time. You started food delivery before
Yeah.
mobile phones were really a thing or GPS was really a thing.
We had a call center.
Right. So that sometimes you're ahead of time. Sometimes it's also poor execution, and I don't think I did a good enough job of understanding the consumer needs as well as I should have. And then, of course, we also started seeing that the whole quick commerce wave was taking off. And then,
You have to decide.
yeah, and then basically what we could capture was primarily, your milk, bread, eggs sort of stuff, which was not enough basket size to make the economics work.
Right.
And then we realized that that's not a business that we can continue scaling, and we had to, sunset it into a different business later. But yeah, that's the story of.
So broadly, try a lot of things based on what works for the customer, gate it, see at what point you want to scale.
Yeah, so I would say I would just caveat that a little bit, right? I would definitely say that being obsessed about a problem and making sure that you take it to its logical conclusion is important before you start diversifying into others, right? Even I mean, in hindsight, I would say it's probably a little early for us as well. But we started out in 2015, 2014, right? The first set of our um, innovations beyond the core food delivery business happened in 2019. It was 5 years after, right? Till then, it was super clear obsession about making sure that the food delivery business could hit a size and scale and establish itself as a force to reckon with, right? Only when we felt comfortable that this is something we feel is confident working is when we started doing other things. Now everyone's going to do their own thing. I'm no one to go and tell people how to run.
But as you're saying it, I'm thinking, you mentioned Freshworks earlier, and Fresh Desk was their main product for the longest time.
Yeah.
And only after they hit a particular scale and they were very confident of it, did they start, they rebranded themselves to Freshworks and started doing other products. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll find one example contrary to this, right? Someone who basically started out very early and did a bunch of things and still are very successful. So you can always, I personally at least believe, this is my belief, that you want to be super obsessed about something, taking it to a particular size, scale, and size where it can run itself in many ways before you as a founder should start diversifying, because your time is really valuable, right? I mean, you bring a lot of focus. I mean, we keep talking about this as companies. You are a function of what you do, but also a function of what you choose not to do. And I would definitely push for driving great focus.
Fair enough. And as you're saying that, I'm also thinking Professor Ravindran, who you mentioned, who was your BTech, BTP guide. By the way, students don't have to do BTP now. They can trade it with a credit course.
Yeah, I would have loved it.
Yeah. Professor Ravindran said in reinforcement learning, there's this idea of exploration versus exploitation, where you have to sort of decide whether you want to branch out, and at some point you have to sort of refocus, go deeper, sort of like a breadth versus depth.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, see, on this, right, basically, I would say there's something we keep discussing, and Harsha said it once, right? In India or world over, you're never going to be successful alone. If you're going to be successful, people will necessarily take a crack at it, right? Like, give me a company which doesn't have competition in the world, right? For a while, people thought, OpenAI was miles above everyone else. And then, Claude dropped and DeepSeek dropped and Llama is there, like Perplexity. There are just so many companies out there right now. Right? You're never going to be successful alone, because if you're going after a really tough problem and if you're going after creating a lot of value, people will follow you.
Yeah.
People will necessarily take crack at it, right?
Sure. And the minute you've proven it, it's more incentive for others to try it.
Absolutely. It's again the 4-minute mile in a way, right? And the thing is, because you're talking about innovation in us, I would say that, every time you're picking a fight, you're picking up with a fight with the guy who's going to not do 90 hours a week because it's said somewhere, but genuinely wants to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like wakes up every day just dreaming about that problem statement. And you need to beat that resilience and that drive and that passion.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not going to be easy. For that, you should be able to give the same amount of passion back in many, many ways. And that, I think, is going to be important. Can you afford to actually give that much passion?
Yeah. Fair enough. So that the innovation DNA has to remain as you grow older as a company, because now there's some other young company which is trying to.
Yeah, and you try anything new and you're successful at it, 4 people will turn up. As has been the case with us with, let's say, the 10-minute delivery as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, did you expect 10-minute delivery to be such a big thing?
I mean, we didn't start out actually as a 10-minute delivery, right? We started out with a 45-minute delivery, to be honest. Right? And our thesis was very simple. We said, hey, we built a layer of Domino's over every restaurant. Can we build a layer of Swiggy over every, grocery needs, right? And that's how we started, which is a 40-minute delivery. It's actually a competition, which came and basically said, like, globally, there's a wave of 10-minute deliveries and stuff like that. And I saw a competition who came and basically said, you know what, actually, you can do that in India and you can possibly do it profitably too, right? So I'd give credit where it's due in that sense. But going back to your question, no, I don't, I don't think any of us really
I remember somebody asked me because they were doing some market research in Bangalore and I was one of their subjects. And there were a bunch of 10-minute delivery questions. I was like, why will I ever need this? Don't need.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Still.
probably happy with the fast track when you're in campus, right? Like you could just call a cab and it'd come to your doorstep, right? I don't know if
I don't
you
know if
woke
they
up.
still exist, by the way.
I don't know. But I don't know if you woke up basically thinking, oh, I wish if I just had an app to do it, right? I think people imagine consumers are good at explaining their problem. They're not great at giving solutions.
Sure.
Like seldom, because you're limited by your imagination. It's like
This is
famous
Henry Ford.
yeah, for example, right? Like, what do you want, right? People will say, I wish I could get there faster. That is the articulation that they're going to give. It's your, as the entrepreneur, it's your basically, it's all, the onus is on you to imagine that, hey, they don't mean a faster house cart. They actually mean a car.
Fair enough. So the argument there is that wherever there's a leap that's required, consumers will not be able to always imagine that leap. And Henry Ford said, if I had asked my customers, they would have asked for a faster horse carriage and not really a car because they didn't see it coming.
Yeah, they didn't. And therefore, I don't think when people
That
run a survey
Yeah.
on Twitter saying, hey, will you order 10-minute delivery? And people are like, no, who wants it? I don't think it works that way.
Yeah.
Right? It finally comes down to what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Is it an important enough problem? Right? And the kind of problems that we solve are like very wide and diverse. It's India versus South Africa, T20 World Cup final, 70 runs required of 30 balls or 35 balls. You're not going to order anything if it is not going to come in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously a very indulgent example. But, there's this, consumer I was talking to in Delhi last year actually, right? And she was talking about how she was in Jaipur and she needed, some sanitary napkins when she was watching a movie in Jaipur. And we're there for the consumer. So, and then there's this, mother who was talking to me about how her son has a lot of demands, wants this, wants that, etc., right? And now she's like, Pele, I used to feel bad, he used to give me grief, etc. But now I tell him 2 minutes. And it's here. So I do think that the use cases are quite diverse.
Yeah.
People, and actually once you release the solution, then consumers have a way of giving you feedback, of pushing you even more and more. Because as you said, Bezos said, right, like consumers are deeply discontent with the status quo. They always want more and more. It's wider selections, cheaper prices, it's faster deliveries. So that pushes you to say, oh, I'm only doing A, can I do more, can I do more, can I do more?
I think this is a nice segue. I want to segue this to innovation and marketing. Because as you were saying it, I was thinking of the Juhi Chawla ad that you guys released. That was hilarious. The ad goes like, I think somebody is typing chawal and the delivery team has started packing Juhi Chawla and it's hilarious. I think it's a moonshot ad, right?
Yeah.
I guess they're known for those kind of ads. But also the thing that I'm interested in is that from an innovation and marketing perspective, Swiggy was really quiet for 5 years,
Yeah.
6 years. And suddenly like there was a lot of activity coming out of Swiggy,
Yeah.
which was nice to watch.
Yeah.
In contrast to say an Ola or a Zomato, which were very heavily marketed right from the beginning, very heavily founder-led
Right.
marketing. So I'm curious to know what is the thought process inside. Ho- what flipped?
See, I think I would actually say that the two different points you're making, right? One is about founder-led
Yeah,
marketing or
sure.
brand, etc., and the other one, which is where Ola and Zomato come in, and then there's this whole brand marketing.
Yeah,
right,
where do
which
you
is
start brand marketing?
right. I actually think we've probably been associated with some of the seminal campaigns, even much before, right? Like the Gulab Jamun Uncle
Oh yeah.
ad is, of course, like quite famous.
Yeah.
And people still recall it and recollect it even today, right? So I would actually say that we did always have um, a draw towards good brand marketing campaigns. I don't think Harsha and Andy or any of us would take credit for that. It's largely the team which came up with the campaign, executed it, won plaudits, won awards, whatever be the case, right? So what I think the point you're of course making is, hey, the last couple of years, suddenly there seems to be a breadth of
Yeah.
new campaigns which is making noise. It comes down to the team, right? I think if you take really solid folks, give them the mandate, give them the playground to play with, people create magic. And we have a pretty solid team. In between, I would say we went a lot more perf oriented, like investing performance marketing oriented, as opposed to, let's say, investing as much. I wouldn't say we didn't do enough bad marketing, but there's a lot more focus on performance. But I think we
It's a
came back.
tough question, right? Like because when you meet founders, they're always thinking about, should I do performance marketing? Should I do brand marketing?
Yeah.
What is the split of money?
Yeah.
How much should I invest? Should I
Yeah.
have better people there? Should I have better people else?
Yeah. I mean, you should have great people everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
Right. That's what I would say.
If you've raised $1 billion, sure.
No, I think, see, I mean, you're going to
I
talk
get
to
what you
Tanmay, right? Like you can talk to, I think it comes down to going and identifying great talent.
Yeah.
There's a discussion in the IITM entrepreneurs group the other day also about who do you hire for. I do think, if you have the patience and the time, there is amazing talent
Fair
at a good price point.
And I guess as an entrepreneur, it's also, as a founder, it's also your responsibility to sort of make the workplace attractive
Yeah.
to really good talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think, some of it is brand. Actually, people look at the early set of employees for Swiggy were people who experience the service. And they're like, hey, I want to be part of this in many ways, right? Like our first sales head was actually a customer who, when we went to deliver food, said, I want to join you guys.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
So, what I would say is that, these questions of brand versus performance, there'll be some people like, hey, if you do brand and performance becomes efficient, etc., right? You'll figure it out. It varies from category to category. I actually fundamentally believe if you've not read, have you read Hamilton's 7 Powers?
No.
If you've not read it, I would like do a
Make it up.
very hard recommend for anyone even listening here, right? He talks about what he thinks that actually distinguishes companies. What are the 7 axes of differentiation? He tried to distill down to that, right? And I can quickly maybe talk about it, but he starts off by basically saying a corner to sauce is usually one of the key things, right? Then you have your switching costs, you have scale effects, you have network effects, etc. But finally, at the end, what matters the most towards the end is going to be your brand,
Yeah.
and it's going to be your DNA.
Yeah.
Right. He calls it process power. For example, the best example of process power is Toyota. Right. There's only one Toyota in the world. Everyone basically knows. Everyone keeps wondering how do you make great quality at such a cheap price. Everyone's tried to reverse engineer it. Almost everyone has failed.
Yeah.
The only reason it works is there's just fundamentally DNA baked into the company. The guy on the shop floor doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing necessarily, can't articulate it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the systems basically make him work in a particular way, right?
Fair enough.
So that's one.
Unexplainable.
Okay. And the other one is brand, right? Like, at scale, you have to choose Nike versus Adidas, right? No, a lot of people might choose Nike. Some people will choose Adidas. I think it comes down to brand.
So
you
you
should,
that in a long enough scale and at a large enough scale,
yeah.
the largest moats are brand and culture.
Yeah, for example, there's enough cases of carbonated beverages, companies talking about it as well, right? Like where Pepsi is, for example, many times actually spoken about how in a blind test,
Yeah.
they taste better, right? But depending on the market, of course, who's the leader gets determined by which brand to come customers have a higher affinity towards.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. And the other question that you correctly said, I kind of mixed them up, is about founder-led
Yeah.
marketing. And Shirsha and all three of you have been fairly quiet for the longest time.
Yeah.
Is there any reasoning behind that, or what is the thought process? And also, are you guys going to be more visible from now on?
I'm here. No, no. See, when we have a quarterly earnings call, so we have to be there, right? Uh, People keep asking us this, right? I would say it comes down to authenticity, right? Be authentic to who you are. Now, if you are someone who's out there, wants to be the face, own the stage in many way, by all means, that is you. You can't. I think what kills is being inauthentic.
Yeah.
Right? Uh, you know, and companies, there is Sundar, Sundar Pichai's ways of running a company. There is an Elon Musk way of running a company, and there's a Satya Nadella, and all of these are like multi-trillion-dollar businesses which are running at scale, right? So I don't think that there is a right answer or wrong answer. For us, I think it's been about who we are, authentic. We would like for Swiggy, the company, to be the focus of basically what people speak about. And I think we're deeply uncomfortable by, by putting ourselves out there, uh, because it just doesn't come authentically to us, right?
Sure.
And
Fair
that's
enough.
actually, so I don't think it's about trying to draw like a thing saying this is right or that is wrong and that is right. It just comes down to who you are and what are you comfortable with. That's at least what I would say has been the driving factor.
Yeah, I think in the entrepreneurs group also we've had this conversation many times. Builders, founders who are building are sometimes feel a lot of pressure from others that I have to be out there, I have to post more, or I have to give more interviews, I have to explain myself a
Yeah.
lot. But what you're saying is just be yourself and what comes to you naturally.
Yeah, and you feel it's right, you try it, it doesn't work, it's fine, right? I think the moment you start doing things because other people believe it's the right, if you're doing it because you believe it's the right thing to do, even if it doesn't work out, it's fine, right? But you doing it because other people believe it's the right thing to do, that's when I think you'll start to I mean, it's like the Abhimanyu thing, right?
Yeah.
You know only how to get in, you don't know how to get out. For that, you need your own self reserves,
Yeah.
to actually come through in many ways. And that's what I would actually say is, whether it's right or wrong, make sure that you believe what you're doing. And okay, it's okay. It doesn't work. It doesn't work after that. So for us, it's been, we are comfortable in the way we operate, right? We believe that we built a strong enough brand that attracts good talent. Sometimes people actually have to do that as well, right? Like you want to attract a lot more talent.
Yeah.
You need to put yourself out there. Great. For example, some investors really like um, the face being very clear as well, right? And I totally respect that. So I'm not here to say this is right or that is right. Do what we think is right.
Sure. That's amazing. I want to bring this conversation on innovation to this very interesting thing that over the podcast we have spoken to many people about. This idea of first principles thinking,
Yeah.
especially because I guess founders or builders get it because many of the things they're doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
But also the world is doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can check Google saying, how do I do this?
You can now ask ChatGPT for a bunch of stuff, or even Google, right? Yeah.
How do you think about first principles thinking and how does that sort of come into the innovation practice at Swiggy?
Yeah.
In fact, let me start this way. To someone who is a first principles thinker, it's really obvious what it means. To someone who's not, it's really hard to explain what it is.
Right.
So if somebody comes and asks me, how do I become a first principles thinker?
Yeah.
I have zero answer because I don't know. So how would you answer that question?
See, I think um, Elon Musk has spoken about it a fair bit, right? He's spoken about how he talks about the idiot index and stuff like that. You should read about it. But fundamentally, for me, I would say it's just about breaking down a problem statement to its individual constituents, right? It's like basically saying, hey, for profits to increase, revenue needs to go up and cost needs to come down, right? Okay, for revenue to increase, you launch new service lines, you go into new geographies, right? Like it's basically just about breaking down a problem statement into quote unquote a decision tree of sorts, which basically explains how you will address the problem, right? And this is something which I would actually give a lot of credit to, any consulting firm. Like BCG was a incredible influence on me, because you are basically trying to operate in industries that you as a 21-year-old have never
Sure.
even thought about,
Yeah.
right? It could be an IT services client, it could be a bank, it could be anyone else. But the only way in which you can actually add value is by breaking a problem down and saying, okay, to solve this problem, what are the 3, 4 things which are most important? Like mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive. MISI, as the framework, for example, goes. You kind of break down every problem into mutually exclusive areas, and then which are completely exhaustive in nature as well. And then you get started with that. And that's historically why, for example, I took the example of Musk, right? Which is basically saying, hey, when SpaceX had to come, of course, there was traditional information about how much rockets were supposed to cost. Can they be reusable? He basically said, hey, if we could make them reusable, I'm trivializing, of course, but if I can make them reusable, then, the costs of basically operating this goes down in a dramatic way. And, breaking it out into constituent parts, mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive, questioning why that is the case. And I was giving the example of Elon Musk, SpaceX, which what I understand, right? Where the big cost of operation was, like you had spaceships not being used again. That used to increase the cost of operations in a big way. And the simple first principle question there was, why can't we just reuse them? Right? Why does something have to cost? And we've proven it. For example, India's proven it by saying, hey, why does it have to take $1 billion to launch a satellite to Mars, right? Or rover to Mars? And DeepSeek has probably done it by basically saying, why does it take $10 billion to train a model, right? So this is just first principle questioning at its basest form, where people are coming.
Don't accept assumptions, question everything, break it down into mutually exclusive,
Yeah,
complete,
completely exhaustive.
mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive sets. 3 things.
Yeah, and then you start asking, right? Why? I mean, there's also the 5 why principle, right? Like you keep asking why till the time you get to the actual answer as to why something is that particular way.
I think that's the Toyota rule. I'm not sure if this
I'm
is
not
Toyota.
sure about that,
I'll
but
check it up.
yeah, I mean, for example, Musk, again, SpaceX example, right? Elon basically said, hey, why does it have to cost so much? And then, the famous idiot index, right? Like the bomb cost versus the actual cost that you procure it. What is the ratio of that? And if it's really, really high, then there has to be some fundamental issue in the process, which is basically, and then you rework it and say it has to be bomb plus, I don't know, 5%. And
Nice.
that's proper solid first principle questioning. And I think it's super important in charters where um, the ground has not been broken before, right? I'll give you a simple illustration of this. When we started out in food delivery, the one big question that investors had of us was, how big is this market going to be? Now, no one's done any math on that, right? Of course, there are some reports which talk about how big the food services industry is, etc. But we just broke it down to the first principle and said, okay, how many restaurants are there? How much business do they do today? What portion of their sales can we actually capture? How much are we already doing it? And what is it going to be 4 years later? This is first principles in action. And for that, we actually went and spoke to the restaurant and said, how many orders do you do in a day? We saw the first bill number and the last bill number to understand how many orders they do. And then how many were takeaway already at that point in time. And built on top of that to just give an experiment, because there is no way you can actually give a very precise answer to this. What you're looking for is basically saying, hey, does it look large enough? And as long as your first principle logic to explain it is good, I think people are likely to believe it.
Sure. Nice. Yeah, I guess once people start practicing it, they start believing it because it starts working and they see that, okay, this makes sense. I can try this first principles approach again.
Yeah, I think it's
I think
first principle. Maybe I should say that. I think it's a different way. Everyone has first principle thinking. You call it logic, You call it common sense, you call it whatever, right? Like it's just basically that in action in some shape or form, right? The only advantage is, I would say, only difference is if you can start putting some amount of structure to it by saying this mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive stuff, right? Like saying, oh, for this to happen, what are all the things which could happen? And then you start, seeing the magic play by itself. I wouldn't, this is not rocket.
It's not rocket
Yeah,
science.
it's not by any stretch.
Cool. Okay, so that was a good session on innovation. I sort of have some things to take away, and I hope the audience does too. Want to quickly move to impact. Swiggy has been a deeply impactful company. Lots of things have changed
Yeah.
because of Swiggy. I want to ask you, what do you consider as the most satisfying in terms of impact?
See, I think there are two axes that we look at. One is just plain hard numbers, right? And the other day I was having a chat with Harsha, and at the scale at which we operate, I would say, you know, at least a quarter of Bangalore would be ordering from us every month,
Okay.
if not more. A city like Bangalore or Gurgaon, etc. Right? For me, I don't think we really imagined that to happen. Right? Growing up, you grow up on iconic brands, right? Like, I don't know, it could be a Cadbury, it could be Britannia, it could be Coke, it could be Pepsi, it could be any of these guys. To basically see us being a part of the daily lives of millions of consumers is probably something that, yeah, I don't think we really expected or planned for, but that gives an incredible amount of joy to us. The other one, to be honest, is a little bit more emotional. Well, this is number backed emotion, is a little bit more emotional, where, when you do talk to that mother of a child who basically says, I thank you very much because it's 12 o'clock in the night, my kid had a cold, I needed a thermometer, and you guys were there for me, right? Or, a student basically late night needed some, fancy dress competition or whatever, some project work that he had the next day, and we turned up on time for them. Those, I think, are, it's about the joy that you, every festival season, we keep talking about internally, uh, is a very busy time for us. It's a time when, you know, we are away from our families.
Yeah.
To make other people celebrate the festival with their families.
Yeah.
Right. So every time that happens, when we see millions of people just use us, some of them who basically praise us for what we do, that gives a different high because it makes the effort worth it in many ways, right? At the end of the day, you want to do something that makes a difference to people's lives. And yeah, sure, we're not putting rockets in space, but we are helping you have fun on the Diwali and helping you.
I will come back to that comment, but I just want to reflect on this a bit more. I know you mentioned it already, but what is some of the praise that you've received that's totally surprised you?
Uh, I told you, right? Like, I think the one, with that woman in Jaipur,
Right.
I was like, okay, I didn't really
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and so, for example, there was this restaurant partner that we, had in Dehradun, who survived the pandemic because Swiggy was still delivering. Otherwise, her business would have just shut down, and she's spoken about it, right? There is, this delivery partner who started out as a delivery partner, just recently exited us as a product operations executive who's doing a bunch of stuff for us, right? So when these people walk up and say, hey, there's a, it hits different. Yeah, right. Yes, there is a different hit because you're hitting a particular scale and size, but it hits entirely different when you know that you've had some small impact on people's lives.
In the same vein, there's a lot of criticism also, right? And some of it is very predictable,
Yeah.
daily lives of delivery boys or plastic use,
Yeah.
stuff like that. How do you deal with that? Like, is it overwhelming sometimes?
It'll be overwhelming if you can get it, if it gets to you, right? But see, especially as an entrepreneur, you've definitely seen that there are enough highs and lows, right? It comes down to what day of the week it is and what hour of the day it is, right? You have to let the highs basically get you through the lows in many ways. So there are always these ups and downs. I think there's been fair criticism, there's been unfair criticism, many kinds and shapes or forms. But fundamentally, if you look at it, right, we are probably, and Rohit, who's one of our CEOs of food delivery business,
Yeah.
spoke about, we are probably today the fastest to employment generation for any person, right? Like if you land up in Bombay, within 30 minutes, you can start working with Swiggy. And we have a base of what, 400, 500,000 delivery partners who are working with us, 300,000 restaurant partners who are working with us. If you look at the impact that we have in terms of employment directly and indirectly, it will run into millions of people, right? And um, so yes, can we do better? Of course, we always try to find ways to do better, but some of this ends up being a little unfair. Like, literally 2 days back, I was at a friend's. There was a friend visiting my house. He's also IT Madras. His wife was there, and she was asking, saying, "Hey, does the tip really go to the delivery partner?" And we're like, "Hey, of course. Like, where else will the tip go to?" There's unfair criticism which comes from time to time, which is around saying, "Hey, if you charge money for some purpose and say, hey, there's a platform fee," people are like, "Why are you charging a platform fee?" etc. And then possibly the same person 2 days later is going to say, "Hey, what are these loss-making startups? Do they know how to build a business?" Right? So, I mean, it's okay. I think all is fair. We're building a business. If you don't have thick enough a skin, you can't build a business anyway.
Yep.
So I would say
Definitely not of this scale.
yeah, not. I would say it's okay. I don't think we are anyone to go and tell people what they should criticize on and what they should not criticize on. Uh, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. It's important that we continue to learn from people.
Sure.
And today, for example, Fairworks, I'm not sure the name of the company, which publishes treatment of frontline workforce, right? Puts us at number one. And that's also happened because we've taken a lot of effort and energy over the last many years to make sure that we do a good job. Can we do 5 things better? 100%. And we're all ears to
Makes sense.
figure out what that could be.
That's cool. I want to come back to a quote that you made, which said, "Oh, sure, we are not launching rockets." And I remember this maybe about 10 years back. There was a ex Facebook engineer, really smart guy, went on to found other companies. He made this comment saying, "The best minds of my generation are only thinking about how to make people click more ads." It was like all over the internet at that
Yeah.
time. I'm sure there's somebody thinking, "Oh, the best minds of my generation are only thinking about how to get people to order food faster." And
Yeah.
does that criticism even make sense?
No, I don't think so. I mean, sure, you can always find nice quotes to. I'm not sure. I'll tell you what, right? Like, the best minds in our generation are getting people to busy click ads for what? Who are running these ads?
Yeah, makes sense.
Right?
Saying that it's not the technology that's driving the
Yeah, if you're a small enterprise, right? Like small and medium enterprise, which doesn't have big monies to spend in terms of TV campaigns and stuff like that, Meta has probably been the best thing to happen to you in the last
fair thing.
2 decades, right? Like, they have democratized advertising for any guy. There's nothing stopping you from opening up a shop tomorrow, right? And
That's fair. As you saying it, I remember when I started my first business in 2009, we used to print those paper pamphlets and insert them in the newspapers at the beginning of
if
the
you want to do something hyper local, that is the only thing which you could have done,
yeah.
right? And so I think it's probably maybe there is a spirit of basically saying, hey, how do we actually get the best engineers to actually work on problems with great impact? But impact is a very, very subjective territory at the end of the day. Now, if the best mind actually improved the ROI for a small merchant, this Dehradun restaurateur who would be out of a business, and they could figure out, spend 1,000 rupees and get traction on online, I think that's a great job done.
Fair enough. I'm sure she doesn't care about rockets being reusable.
Yeah. So I feel like, as an entrepreneur, or even as an individual, go after your passion, right? And it's okay. You'll course correct. I spoke about this in the IIT MMA Sangam event, right?
Yeah.
The other day. Like, when you're young, take many shots, right? Like, the amount of risk that you can take is very high. So go follow your passions. I know there is again these quotes basically saying, hey, these are all only by successful people. But fine, do it for 1 year, do it for 2 years. If it doesn't work, other opportunities will necessarily open up. The reason why I say so, especially for entrepreneurs, I don't know if you're going to ask that, but I want to anyway say it, is you need to be deeply obsessed about the problem that you're trying to solve for, right? You can't be obsessed about the solution because solutions keep changing. You can have started by saying, I want to build, um, a food delivery platform, right? But then realize that there's a bigger option. We actually started out by saying we wanted to build a logistics platform. Like, that was the original Swiggy in 2013, right? And then realize that there's an opportunity which is there in moving food, so to speak. So you need to be super obsessed about the problem. That's what is probably going to get you through it. And therefore, coming back to the question that you have, as long as you're passionate about it and you think it's going to create impact, let no one else tell you what you can or cannot do.
Fair enough. In fact, I'm just thinking about it also. When we meet in Ask Item, we meet a lot of parents and students who are in that decision making phase of their life of what course to take, what
Yeah.
career to choose, and all
Yeah.
of that. And there's a common path. By the way, your first path, which is the JE, CS, IM,
Yeah.
McKinsey Bain route,
Yeah.
right? MBB route. That is a heavily coveted path. But you have sort of almost moved away from that
Yeah.
to a business which is supremely operations heavy. It's an interesting choice. How would you advise people who are just entering college and are super hyper focused about I want a coding job, I want this job, that job, or
Yeah.
how should they look at this?
Hmm. See, I'll give you an analogy that I keep talking to, right? We have a bunch of these young folks in Swiggy who, come for advising, career advice, right? Like, what do I do? What do I do next, right? And I just have asked them very simple questions saying, okay, how long have you worked for? Right? And how long are you likely to work for? Right? Usually, this is like, some 28-year-old, 29-year-old work for 6 years, probably is going to work for another 30 years in their lives, right? And that kind of sets the perspective.
Right. It's too early.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay if you're going to, take a year off, right? It's a lot more difficult when you're 50, to do it for sure, right? And therefore, the question, it's easy for me to say it, but I would say there's only your job is to probably take the best decision you think with the information that you have available, right? What you can do, what is under your control, is to get as much information as you can. That's the only thing you can do, right? Everything else, you could be preparing for, I don't know, a particular branch, computer science right now. And I think there was a video I saw the other day where the VP engineering of OpenAI came down to IIT Madras and a student asked a question saying, hey, what do you think about jobs for us, right? The world is going to change. You can predict maybe at best what's going to happen 1 year later, and you'll still probably be wrong, right? So your job is to make sure you make the best decision with the information that you have and try to get as much information. Now, is branch A better than branch B and is branch B better than branch C? I have friends who have nothing from IIT Madras who didn't code a single line because they didn't belong to CS, who are like incredibly successful at coding right now. Finally, motivated people, passionate people, driven people will find a way to. I don't know how you thought about start. Did you ever imagine launching Core Voice when you were in IIT Madras?
I think I was very reckless with my decision making, and I only wanted to build, and I didn't plan anything. Just
Which is
well,
true of most of us.
yeah,
It is true of most of us, right? At some point, you'll find a calling which you believe,
yeah,
and then you need to find, hopefully, um,
yeah. Builders will build. Can't stop them. Okay, that's a great point to stop this conversation. Thank you so much for coming. Lots to learn, and I've actually taken notes. So maybe I'll share the notes on the
yeah.
podcast.
No, thanks a lot for having me here. It's a privilege and an honor. I never entered CFI when I was in campus.
It
Right?
was not this big.
I never entered CFI when it's campus. So it's super been a big privilege to be back on campus after so long. Hope people have found it a little bit interesting.